Hi, and welcome to Video 101. I'm John Crossman, and today we're going to talk about career paths. This video and the next couple that follow it, I'll talk about 3 different kinds of career paths, and you can kind of see those stories and decide how you want to approach creating a career as a video professional. A very important and critical thing about video is that it is really a who you know kind of situation. And a lot of businesses are like that. You ask your friends, do they like their doctor? Where do they get their car serviced? Do they like their car? You ask people their opinion and they will tell you based on what they know and what they experienced. Well, video is very much that way because it's an expensive thing to get a video made professionally, and so people tend to go with people they are sure can do it and give them the kind of results they want. So it's not outrageous or anything else. That does make it hard to break in. If you don't have a network of people that know you and know what you can do, it becomes a challenge. And the network of people that I have that have used me for the last 30 years are still where a big majority of my work comes from even to this day. So I can't overemphasize the point that it's a who you know kind of business. Of course, social media is all based on a who you know kind of thing. So if you understand that, then you realize that if you are the kind that's planning your career, you have to be able to create a network of people. And of course, you're going to meet people as you go through your life. And not only do you need to know a number of people, but you need to have performed a valuable service to them along the way so that they'll use you in the future. So for my path, I started at a TV station. And while it all looks neat and cozy at this point in my life, really I didn't know what I wanted to do. And my best friend had asked me, what I was studying in college, and I didn't really know what I wanted to study in college either, but I did like the idea of communications. I had toured for 2 years after high school in a musical group, singing and playing instruments, and I really liked communicating in that manner to people. In fact, I had moved here from where I grew up in Connecticut to be a singer-songwriter. That's really what I wanted to do, but you couldn't get a degree in singer-songwriter, and so my best friend said, well, you should go apply to ad agencies and TV stations and radio and stuff if you want to do that. And not having a better plan, that's what I did. And at that time in our city, almost all of the ad agencies and TV stations were on the same street. So I spent an afternoon hawking my resume around to these places, and most of them didn't have an interest, but one of the TV stations did, and they wanted me to do a job which I wasn't interested in doing, mostly because it was full-time. I didn't specifically have a job I was looking for at a TV station. I was literally just thinking, well, they communicate, maybe there's something I can do there. I certainly didn't have any qualifications to do any specialized work, but I had worked in rudimentary computers up at this time. This is 1978, and so they took that as computer experience, and that's what they wanted me to do, but I didn't want to do that because it was a full-time job, and I was going to college and playing in a band, and I had a lot of things going on. I didn't want a full-time job. I had already done that and been there. So I asked what part-time jobs they had, and they only had one in the whole station, and that was washing the cars for the news department, which had just opened up. They just decided that they had bought these cars and no one took care of them, and even though the people drove them every day, they didn't take care of them, so they wanted someone that could wash and detail and clean and hopefully make the cars not look like trash when they're out in the city. And so that's what I did. I really started as a gopher. I did wash the cars. When the weather got cold, I would pick up film from the bus station. I would run errands. I would deliver packages. I'd do whatever needed to be done. And soon I was doing the teleprompter for the 6 and the 10 o'clock news. And actually, the second day I was there, I think a photographer came down and saw me cleaning the cars, and he thought, wow, that's great. He goes, well, I'm going to go do a live shot. Do you want to come and help? And I thought, okay. And so we went to the park, and I pulled cable and hooked up the, he showed me how to do all this stuff, and hooked up the camera and set up the microwave. And so they used to do a live shot every day at 6 o'clock. If there wasn't a news story, they would do, a live shot at a park for weather or something like that. So I didn't do that every day either, but I started gathering in all this experience of teching this, working some in the studio. Of course, I was in the newsroom, so I saw kind of what people did and how it worked, and really didn't have a burning desire to be a reporter or a producer or even a shooter or an editor at that point. I still had my dream of music, and so that's really what I was focused on. The year I started there happened to be an election year, so the station really did a lot of coverage of the state elections. And on election night, there was a congressman that had been a congressman for several terms, and he was having his first serious challenge. In fact, he ended up losing that night, and his headquarters was in Ogden, which is about, 40 miles north of Salt Lake. And they wanted to be able to go live out of his campaign headquarters. So they asked me if I would go up to the 11th floor of an abandoned hotel. I kid you not. It was like the Bates Motel, but it was 11 stories high, and sit there in an empty penthouse suite. So there was one antenna in one window that a photographer was shooting from the campaign headquarters up to the 11th floor of this hotel, and then it was wired to a portable transmitter, and the other antenna was hitting a mountain range right next to Salt Lake City, about 20 miles away. And so I got that set up, and I monitored that all election night. And I thought, well, welcome to the glamorous profession of television. But it was fun to do, and something that normal people wouldn't generally get to do is sit in a hotel room with the windows open in November, hoping you can still have children when the night is over. So kind of the next watershed moment, I was washing cars, I was running errands, I was doing teleprompter on the news, I was teching on live shots. As I was asked, there was a new discotheque down south, similar to the Salt Lake Ogden. This is Salt Lake and Provo, so down south, and they needed to take a live truck down and actually set it up so the signals would hit the corner of the roof of the building and bend to hit the receivers in Salt Lake County. And while I didn't have engineering experience or whatnot, I understood the basics of stereo equipment and how waves worked and that kind of thing. And so they told me what needed to do, and the engineers monitored the station, and I'd move the antenna until it was just doing what it had the signal strong enough to do. So I was sent down there because the photographer was doing other things, and then he and the reporter eventually showed up later that evening, and they shot some B-roll, which he asked me. He was shooting at the time, was state of the art, was a RCA TK76 camera. Every once in a while you'll catch one in an old movie. They have blue sides, big, and that was the first mini cam that was really made. And it had an umbilical cord that went to a deck that was probably this square, and that had a 3/4 inch tape in it. And so he's weaving in and out between the dancers, and I'm a couple feet behind him carrying the recording deck. And they had lights and smoke and fog and mirror balls and 100 people dancing, and so it was quite a party there. And then we microwaved that footage back to the station, and somebody cut some B-roll that would overroll the reporter. And then at 10 o'clock, they did the live shot, and the photographer was shooting the reporter, and that was microwaved live back, and they rolled the tape at the station and blah, blah, blah. And I thought I had just produced some music for a couple of songwriters that all of this dancing would really look good at and so would match well with, because it was all the same tempo and the same beat. And so when I got back to the station, I looked up the tapes that had been shot and kind of squirreled them away in my car washing closet, thinking that, well, someday I'd like to put those pictures on top of the music that I had just recorded. In mind that MTV was still 3 or 4 years away from actually being MTV. So that's how ancient this is. But that was kind of the first time I had ever thought, well, the pictures would look good on the music and that would be fun to learn how to do. So in late at night after the 10 o'clock news and everyone had gone home, I'd go in and start learning how to do that. And I won't go into the detail here, but you know, I'd get so far and get stuck, and then the next day I'd ask a shooter, you know, what happens when you do this, and that doesn't happen. He goes, oh yeah, you've got to do this. And anyway, they were very nice to tell me, you know, what the next steps were, and eventually I got it done, and I was just going in to actually finish it. Now keep in mind that people didn't even have VHS at this point. I mean, the only place you could play back a videotape was at a TV station or a really large corporation. And so it really was just an exercise for fun to me, because I couldn't take it home and show it to anybody. There was no VHS tape. There were no home video recorders. You know, none of that existed at that point. And so I went in early on a holiday thinking that no one would be there, and no one was there when I got in. But while I was still editing, the news director showed up because he was anchoring the new news, and he said, you know, hey John, what are you doing here? And I went, you know, what can I do for you? And he goes, well, do you know how this equipment works? And I said, yeah. And so he gave me a script with a tape and said, well, why don't you cut this together? And then he gave me another, and you know, I showed it to him, and then he gave me another. And before I went home that morning, I had edited, you know, a package for noon and 6 o'clock. And I mean, there wasn't as much video in the shows as there is now, where everything has video. But I basically edited the stories that had been left for the holiday and then went home. And the next day I come in after school and, you know, grab my bucket and ready to go out and wash some cars. And the chief photographer yells my name across the room, and I go to him and he says, I don't know what you did yesterday, but I'm supposed to hire you as an editor today. And so I was the first editor that they had hired there to be a full-time news videotape editor, and the rest is kind of history. But starting there, of course, I'm working with mostly reporters. Every once in a while I'd work with a photog, but mostly reporters and producers, and these people became my network. And so eventually some of them left to go to work for corporations, or some of them got freelance jobs, and when they needed something edited, they would come back to me because I had done a good job for them in news. And so I would be hired to edit whatever corporate things they were doing. And one of these clients got very frustrated. I could only edit really after 10 o'clock because the news director didn't, you know, we were a news department, we weren't a post-production facility, and so he had to walk a line. He let me do it, but we had to walk a line because the station, you know, did commercial video production for people, and it kind of rubbed them the wrong way that some punk news editor would be editing commercials or editing documentaries when that's really what they wanted $400 an hour to do, is what they did. And I had a client who kept getting jobs, but he didn't have the budget to go pay $400 an hour to edit at a commercial post house. So anyway, he was able to put together some money and asked me if I would come and join them as their editor. And that's how I went from working at a TV station to becoming, I guess, an independent video professional, which I've largely been for the last 25 years. And so, but my first clients were all people that knew me from the TV station. And as people started to leave, they would look me up and say, we're doing a videotape, can you edit it, and that kind of thing. At that time, shooting and editing, producing and writing, they were three pretty distinct specialties. The lines are much more blurry, if there are any lines today. And we'll talk more about, editing as editing in a later video. But so that was my career path. Now, the times have changed, but there's still TV stations, there's still local news, and so there's still opportunities to get your foot in the door and prove yourself. It depends, as I said in an earlier video, what market you're in. If you're in a little market, you may not have a TV station that, is doing local news. If you're in a huge market, it's going to probably be unionized, and so you just can't walk in and start helping. But if you're in a large market, there's going to be other ways that you can get your foot in the door. And so before we end this video, I wanted to look at some of the key elements that have impacted my career, and hopefully these will be helpful to you. So let's break down some of those elements. Number one, I looked for a job in the general industry I was interested in. It could have been advertising, it could have been radio. Today it could be some kind of social media business or public relations business, or still advertising, radio or TV, podcasting. It could be a number of things. Two, I took the car washing job and I made it mine. I took the task of being a teleprompter operator and figured out ways to do it better than it had been done before. I sat in the hotel suite alone on a night in November and made sure that the shot worked. I hung out of a helicopter holding the microwave antenna during a brush fire. I did whatever was asked of me and looked for ways to do it the best way I possibly could. And I always strove to add value to any task I was assigned. So I always strove to add value, not that I changed what they shot or I didn't change what they wrote, but I just made sure I paid attention and cared about how it looked at the end and made it look as good as it possibly could. Number three, it turned out I actually had a knack for it. I could look at video and a script and see what it should look like before I ever edited the first frame. So I have a natural ability to do this kind of visual communication work, and I've used it my whole career, and it continues to serve me. I've known people that don't have the ability, but they like the hardware or they like the technology. And I've seen people that are very talented, more talented than me, get out of the business because they don't want to deal with clients, or they don't get tired of dealing with reporters or managers or whatever. And so so I have a knack for it, and I've ridden that natural ability my whole career. And number four is I was in the right place at the right time. I literally started right when electronic editing started to gain a foothold. We were the 41st or 42nd market out of the 200 markets that there are at that time in the country. And so normally a station of our size wouldn't really have access to electronic equipment, electronic editing. There wasn't a pool of people to choose from because there weren't people that had experience in what I was doing. And so it was a right place, right time kind of scenario. But you can still find those scenarios today. And so I urge you to look for them. So that's my career path. And even though when I look back, it started kind of by accident, it's been something I've really enjoyed doing. It's something that I believe, anyone, especially if you have some natural ability, can serve you very well in being a career that you can add value to others around you, get that feeling that you can only get when you actually create something and it impacts people, and have a great life and a great career doing it. My name is John Crossman. You've been watching Video 101, Career Path in this particular case. In the next video, we'll talk about a different kind of career path, starting in corporate and in school. And we'll see you then. Thanks for watching.